So we're going to start today with some words from Rosemary Kabaki, Nonviolent Peace Force staff who leads our work in Myanmar and has been doing the assessment and training here in the United States, and Mel Duncan, who leads our advocacy work and is Nonviolent Peace Force's co-founder. I'm going to just turn our attention now, if you'd like to go ahead.
Well, first of all, it's so good to see everyone. I really would like to take the rest of the day and chat with so many of you. It's one of the values of the pandemic is that we do get to see people from faraway places more often. I was asked to talk about some of the early warning, early response indicators that we see and use in the field, and then some overall larger ones. And Rosemary really has a lot more experience at this, but let me share some that are, one might not think of at first, but together form an early warning. And I want to be clear that not one indicator or two or three usually are an early warning. There's a few exceptions when they are. Usually though, it's a constellation of things that we're looking at. And so those things could include that we don't see women walking alone, that markets are either closed or closing earlier in the day or don't have as many people, that shops that extend along the roads are closing down, that there's fewer people in church, that children, these become more grave, children are being abducted. There are troop movements on the roads. Checkpoints are being erected. Groups of men are leaving in large groups. There is a greater prevalence of hate speech. And one story that I'd like to share is we always work with communities so that they define what the indicators are. And one day a woman in South Sudan said, one of the indicators of early warning of conflict is when there's fresh milk in the market. And that befuddled me. And so I asked, well, say more. And she said, when there's fresh milk in the market, that means that the cattle herders are nearby and that they will, there's a chance that they will graze their herds through our farmland and we won't have food. And so that causes conflict. So it can be subtle things that we don't think about, like fresh milk in the market. Also, in terms of broader early warning indicators that I think that we're seeing not only in the United States, but in a variety of places around the world, and that is extreme polarization, more of an us versus them, to the point where it becomes more important to stop them from getting what they want than us getting what we want. Again, hate speech, humiliation speech. Another indicator is no social consensus on facts, an increased number of guns, and when open violence starts to mix with politics. So those are some of the things we look at when we're working with groups in the field on early warning that then leads to early response. And with that, why don't I turn it over to Rosemary?
Thank you, Mel. That's a beautiful setup. With this knowledge of some of the indicators of violence that we take with us in the field, one of the most crucial things for us that we remember is that we don't know what they are. It is the community who tells us what they are. And in order to make it understandable and clear for everyone, we basically ask the communities, what concerns you in your community? And then we start off with an understanding of what is community to the people we have in the room. Some of it is geographic, some of it is ethnic, some of it is age, and they then identify what it is that they're concerned about those areas. And they're able then to tell us, for example, that in my community as a young man, my concern is that when we see ethnic arm organization moving from one side to the other, then what is concerning is they will want to recruit young men from my village. So that helps us identify, well, not only the indicator, but the vulnerable group that is affected by that type of violence. And it's been fascinating for me, for example, here in Minneapolis, when we have asked those kind of questions, what concerns you in North Minneapolis? And depending on who you ask, we ask a group of young men who are in a wonderful program of interrupting violence, gang interrupters, and they then tell us what is concerning for them. And they can identify, for example, and say, when we are moving from one area to the other, a policeman seeing me with my hoodie would actually be wanting to arrest me because I've got a hoodie, I've got a mask, and that appears to be threatening. And then we're able to then see the presence of a lot of policemen in this area would actually be an indicator that violence may actually go towards this particular young man. And that has translated very well in Burma, for example, in the Philippines. And we ask the same question, an identification of what you consider to be your community. And depending on who is there, we get different kinds of indicators. The women give us different indicators, very much like Mel was talking about. The men of the community see other indicators. So the first step of identification. I will share more examples on what we have seen here in Minneapolis and also other indicators that have been shared with us, whether in the Philippines, whether it is in Burma, and it is very personal because what affects one demography of people may not affect another demography. And it is very important as an organization that looks towards bringing safety in our communities for us to capture these indicators for different demographies within the community. Otherwise, our protection is not as comprehensive as it could be. And then, of course, we then look into, once we identify it's a mixed community, we then ask the indicators for the other community because we want to protect the whole community. So then if it's a mixed community of Burmese people, for example, with Kachin group, which is another ethnic group, we will go to each of those communities and identify what indicators they themselves would have. And then from there, we're able to start identifying how we can interrupt those cycles of violence and how we can protect the civilians that are vulnerable to that type of violence. All right, thank you.
I want to turn to Rosemary and Mel if you're ready. You've had a chance to take a look at some of the themes to speak to what you're seeing here and to prepare us for our next small group.
Going through them. Opportunities we find in the field in Burma, we get a very similar. And one of the ways that I would like us to start reflecting on is which ones can we start working on? And also recognizing that this is not something to do in the next 1 day, in the next 2 days, in the next 4 days. We have identified the indicators for violence, and some may have are being seen now because maybe there's elections coming up, so then you can see it better. But it's been an underlying indicator that has not been picked up. And what can we start doing as a community? One of the things that I found that was came up in quite a lot of them is reference to an armed group, whether it's the police, come and help us resolve this. And then there were comments about what can we do as a community. So then a whole mapping situation to look at what can we do and who can help us intervene in this with these indicators of violence before we start going to armed actors to ask them, please come and intervene. So one of the things I would like to say, and we've done some of it in Minneapolis and have done it definitely in Burma, is trying to offer a whole range of tools other than violence that people could start using in order to intervene in this situation. So for example, even this afternoon, we will be having a 2-3 hour training with some people from Minneapolis who would like to be election monitors. And some of them, to be honest, prior to this, may have considered being armed as a way to protect their communities. They're expecting armed actors to come in. So some of the comments were like, we may have a few white supremacists in this poll station. So they were considering, what do we do to protect ourselves? And by offering them alternative tools, they then would then be able to start considering, other than themselves picking up arms to protect their communities, what else could they do? And the value of looking at it, not what's happening in the whole of Minneapolis, but what's happening in a specific poll station. That is your neighborhood, the one that you're concerned about. And what indicators for that poll station would you be addressing to? So I was struck by how heartfelt and really on the button a lot of these indicators for violence are. I was also additionally struck by people saying we need to reach out to each other. We need to be able to start linking with each other. And consequently, one of the first steps would be, how do we start linking and connecting with each other? That just comes out from me broadly from almost all the groups. Mel, do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. One of the themes that I saw come through from several groups is that what we're seeing really is a manifestation of structural violence, and that the structural violence, whether it be corporate welfare, as came up in one group, certainly institutionalized racism, that those really provide the foundation for many of the manifestations that we're seeing. I see as one of the basis for my understanding of nonviolence is a recognition of our unity. And again, I heard the opposite of that happening, the otherization of seeing people as different, being afraid of people, the hate speech, and people having different sets of truth. And that is very disturbing at a fundamental level, especially in a democracy, if people cannot agree on truth. And we've seen the violence and especially the response to COVID being increasingly politicized. And that came up in one of the groups, that whether or not you wear a mask, whether or not you abide by social distancing, has become a political statement in some areas, and has led to aggression and intolerance. And then finally, or second to last, we're talking with people where active gun violence is going on, whether that be police brutality that continues, or whether that be the white supremacists who, again, are on their way. They're very clear. They're being recruited to come to Minneapolis for the elections and being paid $910 a day. And also in places like Darfur, where the bullets continue to fly and where almost everyone has a gun. And certainly the continuation of the spreading of guns is a very disturbing situation. And then finally, the elections being a flashpoint for violence, and people really looking at what they can do to keep polling places safe so that people are able to vote.
Thanks, Mel. Since we have a little bit more time, I'd love to ask Rosemary and Mel. I heard in Rosemary was sharing around connecting with others. And here we are, you know, having the opportunity to connect with each other, which is wonderful. Are there other ways in which we can be connecting during this time, or thoughts on a community basis?
I think it is a time to be intentional about communities and reinforcing those bonds, which are very, very difficult in this age of the pandemic. But there are ways that people can connect, and to be creative of that, because first and foremost, in every violent conflict where we've worked, strong communities are the foundation for security. And so be intentional about being connecting with communities. An essay by Melanie Greenberg and Jean-Paul Lederach suggests that you choose an uncomfortable relationship to create and to reach out to someone who you know you disagree with, and have virtual coffee and not try to convince them of anything, but to connect, to talk about community, to talk about family. I think another thing is for those of us who can, to get the training that's so important in terms of both at the polling place and also nonviolent approaches after the election. There is a very good chance we will not have a conclusion on Tuesday night, the 3rd. It could go on for several weeks. And another thing we can do is to urge people to stay calm and to dispel rumors and conspiracies that will be flying from Election Day on.
Thank you, Mel. Rosemary, would you add anything?
Thank you. Overall, I would love to say that one of the things that happens with indicators of violence is they don't miraculously disappear. Is, for example, in the United States after the election, or maybe even after the inauguration, is a recognition that we have now identified splits within our community that we can commit to work towards. I think I've seen a comment, maybe at this time, people finding it difficult to talk to each other. But this may be that this will change over a period of time if we try and make the effort. A recognition that these indicators of violence that we are seeing, we would want to start engaging and reducing those frictions that are happening in our community. They have been shown out by specific events, but they have been there possibly, definitely for a certain group of communities. And I love that people are starting to reach out. And if it's difficult this time, try again. I have been in Burma for 6 years. And I'm telling you, some of the issues I found in Burma 6 years ago, some of them are still there. But over the last 6 years, we have tried to have more and more people involved in getting in coming up with solutions to resolve. Conflict is sometimes healthy. Violence is what we are trying to reduce. So we look for alternative ways to start resolving this conflict, and that we don't stop. That what we can do now, we do now, and pick up, build those foundations to build on a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, maybe even 10 years from now. Conflicts are so complicated and intertwined that it may take time to unwind all these factors that we've talked about in our communities. So one of the things that we've done is give a bit of training, maybe to replacement of schools here in Minneapolis, in one district. That's not the beginning and end all. It's not that it was not just having 6, 7, 10 policemen that was a problem, or in schools. It was a system structural thing. And hopefully the new people that have taken up those positions will start on the way to unraveling some of those underlying root causes of the conflict, and how then to do that in a non-violent way. So it's not negative. I see it always as a positive, wonderful opportunities. Once I have identified, and we've worked together to identify those indicators of violence, then as a community, what can we do? What can we do now? What do we do in the midterm? What do we do long term? But when all is said and done, this is our community, our people, and we will not stop until we've managed to reduce violence and protect as many civilians as possible.